My dear friends, and indeed loyal chroniclers of the little grey cells, I find myself once again recalling a rather peculiar case, one that left even my usually unflappable spirit with a lingering chill. It began, as these things often do, with a perfectly ordinary invitation to what promised to be a most extraordinary event, only to descend, as they inevitably seem to when Hercule Poirot is involved, into an intricate web of deceit and, alas, death. There's a certain unsettling quietude about a grand conservatory at night, isn't there? A sense of life thriving yet holding secrets within its vibrant embrace. Poirot, of course, noticed it at once. That subtle shift in the air, that unspoken tension lurking beneath the polished veneer of polite society. He always does. It's a remarkable, if sometimes unnerving, talent. But then, that is our Poirot, isn't it? Always a step ahead, always perceiving the slight irregularity in the grand design. If you enjoy delving into the heart of a good mystery, do consider subscribing to the channel for more tales of his unparalleled brilliance. Now, let us begin with the first chapter of Death at the Winter Garden. Chapter 1. The chill of a late November evening had settled over London, clinging to the cobbled streets and seeping into the grand old houses of Mayfair. Inside the magnificent winter garden of Sir Alister Finch's estate, however, a perpetual summer reigned. The air, thick with the scent of exotic blossoms and damp earth, hung heavy and humid, a stark contrast to the biting cold outside. My friend, Hercule Poirot, adjusted his exquisitely starched collar, a tiny frown marring his otherwise composed expression. We had been invited to what promised to be a spectacular charity gala, a lavish affair hosted by Sir Alister, a renowned botanist and collector of rare flora, and his much younger, famously flamboyant wife, Lady Seraphina. Magnificent Hastings, n'est-ce pas? Poirot murmured, gesturing with a delicate hand towards a towering tree fern, its fronds unfurling like ancient scrolls. Yet there is a dissonance, a certain artificiality, even amidst such natural beauty. One feels the hand of man too strongly. I merely grunted, more interested in the tray of champagne flutes being circulated by a stern-faced footman. The winter garden itself was an architectural marvel, a vast glass house spanning several acres, filled with an astounding collection of plants from every corner of the globe. Pathways of polished flagstone wound through dense foliage, past shimmering ponds filled with koi, and beneath canopies of orchids and bromeliads. Guests, a diverse array of London society, drifted through the verdant labyrinth, their jewels sparkling amidst the greenery, their laughter echoing a little too brightly in the humid air. Among the crowd, I spotted several prominent figures. There was Lady Beatrice Carrington, an elegant but sharp-tongued doyenne of society, clutching a delicate fan. Nearby, Julian Thorne, Sir Alister's nephew, a young man with a restless glint in his eye and a perpetually rumpled suit, seemed to be engaged in an animated, if hushed, conversation with Anya Petrova, a striking Russian art dealer known for her enigmatic smile and even more enigmatic financial dealings. Further along, Mr. Reginald Vance, an American industrialist with the bearing of a bulldog, stood by a giant pitcher plant, seemingly more interested in its carnivorous capabilities than the surrounding small talk. Dr. D.V. Sharma, a brilliant Indian botanist who had recently collaborated with Sir Alister on a controversial genetically modified orchid, stood somewhat apart, her gaze distant, lost in thought. Poirot, of course, noticed everything. His small, shrewd eyes darted from face to face, taking in a dropped glove, a lingering glance, a sudden hushed silence. He had a particular fascination with the display of carnivorous plants, observing their intricate traps with an almost scientific detachment. "It is a microcosm, Hastings," he observed, tapping a manicured finger against his chin. "Each element, each individual, plays a role in this self-contained world. And sometimes, mon ami, The most beautiful elements can conceal the most deadly intentions. Our host, Sir Alistair Finch, a man in his late 60s with a shock of unruly white hair and a perpetually distracted air, was nowhere to be seen. He was known for his eccentricity, often disappearing for hours to tend to a particularly sensitive specimen. Lady Seraphina, his considerably younger wife, a woman of dazzling beauty and an equally dazzling wardrobe, was flitting between groups, her laughter like tinkling bells. Suddenly, a piercing shriek cut through the polite murmur of conversation. It was Lady Seraphina, her voice raw with terror. All eyes turned to a secluded alcove near a cascading waterfall where Sir Alistair kept some of his most prized and delicate specimens, rare, exotic orchids, some rumored to be extinct in the wild. Lady Seraphina stood frozen, pointing a trembling finger. At her feet, partially obscured by the lush foliage of a giant Monstera deliciosa, lay Sir Alistair Finch. His face was a ghastly grey, his eyes wide and staring, fixed on something unseen. A single, exquisite purple orchid lay crushed beneath his lifeless hand. The party, so recently vibrant with life and laughter, had instantly transformed into a tableau of horrified silence. The scent of exotic blooms now seemed to cloy the air, heavy with something far more sinister than mere perfume. It was quite clear, even to my less discerning eye, that Sir Alistair Finch was undeniably, unmistakably dead. And the silence that followed, broken only by Lady Seraphina's ragged sobs, pressed down upon us all, promising a night of dread and unanswered questions. Chapter 2. The arrival of the local constabulary did little to dispel the oppressive atmosphere. Inspector Japp, a long-time acquaintance of Poirot's from Scotland Yard, arrived looking weary, his usual jovial nature replaced by a grim professionalism. He gave Poirot a nod of resigned acknowledgement. "Poirot, eh? Knew you wouldn't be far when something like this happens." Poirot merely inclined his head. "A regrettable coincidence, Japp, though I confess, the stage is set rather dramatically. The Winter Garden, once a place of wonder, was now a crime scene. Uniformed officers moved carefully through the pathways, their heavy boots a stark contrast to the delicate plants. Dr. Devi Sharma, the botanist, was already examining the crushed orchid in Sir Alistair's hand, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Any obvious cause, Japp?" I inquired, trying to sound helpful. Japp grunted. "Not yet, Captain. No signs of struggle, no weapon. Looks like he just collapsed. But a man like Sir Alistair, healthy as a horse, doesn't just drop dead in the middle of his own party." Lady Seraphina, now somewhat composed but still visibly shaken, was being comforted by Lady Beatrice Carrington. Julian Thorne stood a little way off, his face pale, running a hand through his already dishevelled hair. Anya Petrova watched the scene with an almost detached interest, her dark eyes missing nothing. Mr. Reginald Vance, the American, looked thoroughly annoyed, his gaze shifting between the body and the bustling officers as if impatient with the interruption. Poirot, meanwhile, was not engaging in the usual preliminary police interviews. Instead, he was performing his own peculiar ritual. He circled the alcove where Sir Alistair lay, his eyes scanning every leaf, every patch of soil, every tiny detail. He bent low, examining the flagstones, the base of the Monstera, even the water in the nearby pond. He then turned his attention to the crushed orchid. "Dr. Sharma, if you please?" Poirot addressed the botanist, his voice soft but authoritative. "What do you make of this particular specimen?" Dr. Sharma, startled by his sudden address, looked up. "It appears to be a Paphiopedilum bellatulum, an exquisite and exceedingly rare slipper orchid. Sir Alistair had a particularly fine collection. The petal structure is consistent." She paused, then added, "It's been quite violently crushed, as if in a sudden spasm." "Indeed." Poirot mused, then looked directly at the orchid itself, its vibrant purple now somewhat bruised. And its properties, Doctor? Any unusual characteristics known to you? Dr. Sharma hesitated. Paphiopedilum. Species are generally not poisonous. However, Sir Alistair was known to experiment with hybridization. It's possible, though highly unlikely, that he created something with unforeseen properties. Poirot hummed, a tiny, satisfied sound. He then looked towards a small, ornate wooden bench nestled further into the alcove, partially hidden by a thick curtain of ivy. He walked over and gently brushed aside a few strands of ivy. On the bench, almost invisible against the dark wood, was a single, perfectly round, small glass vial. It was empty. Japp, noticing Poirot's discovery, strode over. "What's this, then?" he asked, picking it up carefully with a gloved hand. Poirot examined it. "An interesting find, Japp. No label, no markings. Just a very small, very clean vial. One might almost say, Hastings, it is suspiciously clean." He then straightened up, his gaze sweeping over the gathered suspects. Sir Alistair Finch, a man dedicated to the delicate balance of nature, is found dead clutching a rare orchid. And here, an empty vial. The plot, as they say, thickens. I'm reminded, Japp, of a certain case involving a rare tropical fish and a very discreet poison. The method, in this instance, suggests a very specific knowledge, a very precise intention. Someone here understood not only the human anatomy, but also the subtle, silent language of plants. Someone, mon ami, who wished to bring about a death as unique as Sir Alistair's botanical treasures. Japp looked from the vial to Poirot, then to the diverse faces of the guests, a growing unease in his eyes. The little grey cells, I knew, were already whirring. The empty vial was a crucial piece, yet it only opened more questions. Who had placed it there? What had it contained? And why, in a garden full of potential natural poisons, would someone choose such a subtle, almost poetic instrument of death? The game, as Poirot would say, was most certainly afoot, and its opening move was chillingly precise. Chapter 3. The winter garden was cleared of all but essential personnel, the vibrant life of the plants now seeming to mock the stillness of death. Poirot had requested that no one leave the premises, and the remaining guests were gathered in an antechamber, an air of sullen resentment mingling with their shock. Poirot began his preliminary interviews, starting with Lady Seraphina, who was still fragile, her beautiful face tear-streaked. "My dear Lady Seraphina," Poirot began gently, "my sincerest condolences. Could you tell me what exactly transpired when you found Sir Alistair?" She dabbed at her eyes with a silk handkerchief. I was looking for him. He often wandered off to admire his orchids, especially the rare ones. I went to the waterfall alcove, it was his favorite spot, and there he was, just lying there. I thought he'd fainted at first, but... oh, it was dreadful. Did you notice anything unusual before you found him? Poirot pressed. Any peculiar smells, perhaps? Or anyone else near the alcove? She thought for a moment. No, not really. The usual garden scents, and everyone was mingling. It was a large party. I saw Julian, my nephew-in-law, speaking with Miss Petrova earlier, but that was much before it happened. Dr. Sharma was always around the plants. Poirot nodded, making a small note in his ever-present notebook. Next was Julian Thorne, Sir Alistair's nephew. Julian, though outwardly grief-stricken, had a restless energy about him. "Terrible business," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Uncle Alistair was... well, he was eccentric, but he didn't deserve this." "Did you see your uncle in the hours leading up to his death?" Poirot asked. "Briefly, yes. He was rather agitated about something. Said he'd had a rather unpleasant encounter earlier in the evening, but wouldn't elaborate. Just brushed it off as a trivial annoyance." Julian paused, then added, almost too casually. He was planning to make some significant changes to his will, you know. Mentioned it only this morning. Said he was going to cut out certain undeserving parties. My ears pricked up. A change in the will and an agitated encounter. This certainly added another layer to the mystery. Poirot's eyes, however, remained impassive. "And you, Monsieur Thorne, where were you when Sir Alistair was found?" "I was by the entrance, saying goodbye to a few acquaintances who were leaving early." "Didn't see anything, I'm afraid. Just heard Seraphina's scream." Poirot then turned his attention to Anya Petrova, the Russian art dealer. She exuded an air of cool composure, despite the circumstances. "Monsieur Poirot," she greeted him, her voice a low purr. "A most unfortunate turn of events." "Indeed, mademoiselle. I understand you were conversing with Monsieur Thorne earlier." "Yes, briefly. We discussed a potential acquisition for Sir Alistair's art collection. He had exquisite taste, you know, always looking for something unique." Her eyes, dark and intelligent, met Poirot's without flinching. "Sir Alistair was particularly keen on a rather rare botanical etching I'd acquired. He seemed quite animated by it, actually." "Animated?" Poirot repeated, his head cocked slightly. "In what manner?" "Excited, perhaps. He mentioned it connected to a project he was working on. Something about a missing link in a botanical lineage." She shrugged delicately. "I confess the details were rather beyond my scope of interest." The empty vial was still very much on Poirot's mind. He then spoke to Dr. Devi Sharma, who had finished her initial assessment of the scene. "Dr. Sharma, what can you tell me about the potential for poisons within Sir Alistair's collection?" She pushed her spectacles up her nose. Sir Alistair certainly had access to many plants with toxic properties, as do all botanists. But he was meticulous. He kept all dangerous specimens under strict security, locked away in a separate, fortified greenhouse within the main structure, accessible only by a keycard he carried. "A keycard?" Poirot asked, his eyes narrowing. "And was this keycard found on his person?" Jap, who had been listening in, interjected. "No, Poirot. We checked. His wallet, watch, and even a small decorative silver key were present. But no keycard. We assumed he hadn't taken it with him to the party." Dr. Sharma's face became a shade paler. "That's highly unusual. He never went anywhere without it. He was paranoid about his experimental specimens being tampered with." Poirot looked thoughtful. "So, the means of access to potentially deadly agents, not on the victim. This complicates matters. It suggests not only a knowledge of poisons, but also a knowledge of Sir Alistair's security protocols, or perhaps a prior opportunity to pilfer the keycard." He stroked his mustache. "And the vial, Jap? Has the laboratory confirmed its contents, or lack thereof?" Jap shook his head. "Too small for any residue, they say. Just glass. Could have held anything or nothing." "Ah, but it held something," Poirot stated firmly. "A something that killed Sir Alistair. And the absence of the keycard, Hastings, provides our killer with a very elegant solution to a very pressing problem. It means that the murderer either possessed the keycard or knew where to find it. And this, mon ami, points us directly to someone intimately acquainted with Sir Alistair's habits, his secrets, and his most dangerous botanical treasures." The Winter Garden, far from being an open book, had only deepened its secrets, each clue seemingly designed to lead us further into its tangled, suffocating embrace. Chapter 4. The next morning, a grey, dismal London dawn painted the city in shades of slate. Poirot, however, was as immaculate and energetic as ever. We returned to the Winter Garden, which now held an even more unsettling air in the cold light of day. The police forensic team was still meticulously sifting through the alcove, but Poirot's focus was elsewhere. "The keycard, Hastings. The missing keycard," he declared, tapping his finger against his lips. "It is central. Someone gained access to Sir Alistair's most dangerous collection. But how? Was it stolen? Or did Sir Alistair, in a moment of misplaced trust, give it to someone. We made our way to Sir Alister's private study, a room overflowing with books, botanical charts, and microscopes. Jap had secured it overnight. On a large antique desk, amidst stacks of scientific papers, lay a half-finished letter. Poirot, with Jap's permission, carefully read it. It was addressed to Sir Alister's solicitor. And furthermore, regarding the recent attempts to acquire the formula for the Nightingale's Tear project, I must reiterate my firm refusal. The ethical implications are simply too vast. I have no intention of allowing my research to fall into unscrupulous hands. I will be making significant revisions to my will to ensure this outcome, disinheriting anyone who might seek to exploit my life's work. Poirot stopped reading, his brow deeply furrowed. The Nightingale's Tear project, he mused. Dr. Sharma mentioned Sir Alister was working on a controversial genetically modified orchid. This must be it. Jap looked grim. So, Sir Alister was not only changing his will, but he was also sitting on a valuable and potentially dangerous secret. That gives us motive, Poirot. Indeed, Jap. And more than one person in that garden would benefit from his silence. Julian Thorne, the disinherited nephew. Lady Seraphina, who stands to lose a comfortable inheritance if the will was revised, and perhaps even others who sought to acquire this Nightingale's Tear. Our next stop was the heavily fortified greenhouse that Dr. Sharma had mentioned. It was a smaller, self-contained unit within the main winter garden, accessible via a reinforced door. Jap's men had managed to force it open after Sir Alister's staff had confirmed the location. Inside, the atmosphere was even more stifling, the air thick with the scent of chemicals and exotic plants. Rows of carefully labeled specimens stood on benches, some encased in glass cloches. Poirot moved slowly, his eyes darting across the labels. Many were marked with dire warnings. Extremely toxic, handle with care. Potent neurotoxin. Cardiac poison. He stopped at a particular section. On one shelf, several pots were arranged, each holding a delicate orchid. One small pot was noticeably empty, a faint indentation in the soil where a plant had once stood. The label next to it read, Orchidea latifera, the deadly orchid. Contains a potent, fast-acting neurotoxin, odorless and tasteless. Aha! Poirot exclaimed, his eyes gleaming. The empty vial, the crushed orchid, and now the missing Orchidea latifera. It is all beginning to connect, Hastings. Jap stared at the empty pot. So the killer took a cutting, used its toxin, and then disposed of it. But how did they get in here without the keycard? Poirot picked up a small, silver-framed photograph from a nearby bench. It showed Sir Alister, much younger, standing proudly beside a lush orchid. In the background, a younger Dr. Devi Sharma was visible, observing the scene with a quiet smile. Dr. Sharma, she worked closely with Sir Alister, Poirot observed. She knew his methods, his security. She also mentioned the controversy surrounding the Nightingale's Tear, and she was conveniently already at the scene examining the orchid. Just then, one of Jap's officers called out from the main winter garden. "Inspector, we found something in the pond near the waterfall alcove." We hurried back. A diver, brought in by the police, emerged from the murky water, holding aloft a small waterproof pouch. Inside, gleaming unmistakably, was Sir Alister's missing keycard. So, it was thrown into the pond after use, Jap deduced. The killer wanted to make it look like Sir Alister didn't have it on him. Poirot's eyes, however, were fixed on something else. He noticed a small, barely perceptible scratch on the side of the keycard, almost like a faint score mark. It was an insignificant detail, perhaps, but Poirot's attention to such trifles was legendary. "Interesting, very interesting," he murmured. "A keycard, found in the pond. It provides access to the poison, but it also presents a new question. If the killer had the keycard, why dispose of it so carelessly? Unless unless they wanted it to be found. And that scratch, Hastings, it is not merely a scratch. It tells a silent story of its own, a story that might just unravel the precise method of the deed and expose the very hand that guided it. The plot, once seemingly straightforward, was coiling into a complex knot, each new revelation adding another twist, another layer of deception. Chapter 5. Poirot requested a full re-interview of all the principal suspects, this time in Sir Alister's study. The atmosphere was palpably tense. Lady Seraphina, Julian Thorne, Anya Petrova, Mr. Reginald Vance, and Dr. Devi Sharma were all present, their faces etched with varying degrees of apprehension and impatience. Poirot began, not by directly addressing the murder, but with a seemingly innocuous question to Lady Seraphina. "Lady Seraphina, your late husband was known for his precision. Did he ever have any peculiar habits regarding his personal effects, particularly his keycard for the fortified greenhouse?" Lady Seraphina frowned, thinking. He was very particular about it, always kept it on a special lanyard around his neck when he was working in the garden, and he engraved his initials on it, AF, with a small silver stylus he kept on his desk. She looked at the keycard Japp had placed on the desk. "Yes, that's it. You can just make out the tiny AF near the corner." Poirot picked up the keycard. Indeed, under the harsh light of the desk lamp, a faint AF was visible, almost blending with the plastic. And there, beside it, was the faint scratch Poirot had observed. "And this scratch, Lady Seraphina, was that also part of his engraving?" She leaned closer. "No, I don't think so. That looks newer, and rather clumsy for Alister's hand." Poirot then turned to Julian Thorne. "Monsieur Thorne, you mentioned your uncle was agitated earlier that evening. Did he speak of this Nightingale's Tear project?" Julian hesitated. "He did, yes. He was very passionate about it, almost obsessively so. Said it was his legacy. He'd had a rather heated discussion earlier with Mr. Vance, the American industrialist, about it. Vance wanted to buy the rights, you see. Uncle Alister was furious at the suggestion. Mr. Reginald Vance, a man who clearly disliked being questioned, bristled. 'That's a distortion. I made a legitimate business offer. Sir Alister was developing something revolutionary. I merely expressed an interest in investing. He was, frankly, being stubborn and unreasonable. Unreasonable enough to provoke a fatal argument.' Poirot's voice was deceptively mild. Vance scoffed. 'Certainly not. I left him perfectly healthy, if a bit red in the face. I was at the bar when his wife screamed. You can check with the bartender.' Poirot then addressed Dr. Devi Sharma. 'Dr. Sharma, you worked closely on the Nightingale's Tear project. What exactly is its significance?' Dr. Sharma adjusted her spectacles. 'It's a genetically modified orchid, Monsieur Poirot, designed to produce a highly potent, fast-acting anti-cancer agent. It has the potential to revolutionize medicine. But Sir Alister was deeply concerned about its misuse. He feared it could be weaponized or its formula stolen and commercialized without proper ethical oversight. He was particularly wary of certain individuals trying to acquire it.' Her gaze flickered briefly towards Anya Petrova. Anya Petrova's composure remained intact. 'My interest, Dr. Sharma, was purely artistic. I was merely brokering the sale of a rare botanical etching that Sir Alister believed held a clue to a historical predecessor of his orchid. A missing link, as he called it. He seemed convinced it contained some hidden botanical cipher.' 'A cipher, mademoiselle?' Poirot's eyes gleamed with interest. 'And what did this etching depict?' 'A very old, almost fantastical depiction of a flower, Monsieur Poirot. An unknown species, said to have healing properties in ancient legends. Sir Alister was obsessed with its connection to his work. He believed its genetic makeup might hold the key to perfecting the Nightingale's Tear without its dangerous side effects.' Poirot paused, considering. So Sir Alister was not merely developing a deadly orchid, but also seeking to refine its benevolent counterpart, a man of contradictions. He then returned to the keycard. Jap, has anyone examined the scratch on the keycard more closely? Perhaps for traces of what might have caused it? Jap replied, Forensics is on it, Poirot, but it's a tiny mark. Could be anything. Poirot, however, shook his head. No, Jap, it is not anything. It is a specific mark, a fresh mark, and it suggests something very deliberate. The killer, in their haste, perhaps made a mistake. Or perhaps Hastings, the killer, wanted us to notice that mark. The missing Orchidea letifera, the empty vial, the critical Nightingale's tear project, and now this seemingly innocuous scratch. Each piece is a fragment of a larger puzzle, a carefully constructed deception. The person who accessed that greenhouse, used that poison, and then tossed that keycard into the pond, knew exactly what they were doing, and that scratch, small as it is, speaks volumes. It tells me that the method of introducing the poison was not as simple as merely uncorking a vial, and that the killer was not quite as invisible as they believed themselves to be. There is a flaw in their meticulous plan, a tiny, almost invisible thread that, if pulled correctly, will unravel the entire elaborate tapestry of lies. The air in the study thickened, the weight of Poirot's words hanging heavy as the implication of a more complex, insidious plot began to sink in. Chapter 6. The forensic report on the keycard scratch arrived later that afternoon. Poirot's eyes lit up as he read it. A microscopic trace of silver, Jap. Exactly as I suspected. And not just any silver, but a specific alloy consistent with a very fine writing implement. A stylus, perhaps. Jap frowned. A stylus. Lady Seraphina said Sir Alistair used a silver stylus to engrave his initials. Are you suggesting he scratched it himself? Perhaps, Poirot mused. Or perhaps someone else used his stylus. But the key is the nature of the scratch. It is not a random gouge. It is a shallow score, almost like a misaimed attempt to write or mark something. It indicates a certain clumsiness or perhaps haste. He then called for Dr. Sharma again. Dr. Sharma, you were working closely with Sir Alistair. Did you ever handle his keycard? She hesitated. Occasionally, if I needed to access a particular specimen in the fortified greenhouse and he was occupied. But he was very particular about it. I always returned it immediately. And his silver stylus? Did you ever use it? No, that was his personal engraving tool. I had no reason to. Her answer was firm, perhaps a little too firm. Poirot then showed her the scratch on the keycard. This scratch, Dr. Sharma, does it look familiar to you? Could it have been made by an accident with a specific piece of equipment in the greenhouse? She examined it closely. No, I don't believe so. It's too precise for an accidental scrape from machinery. It looks like someone tried to make a mark, perhaps even another initial, and slipped. Another initial, Poirot repeated slowly, his gaze thoughtful. Intriguing. He then dismissed her and turned to a large, detailed map of the winter garden that Jap had spread across the desk. Let us reconstruct Hastings. Sir Alistair is found dead in the waterfall alcove. The Orchidea letifera is missing from the fortified greenhouse. The keycard, with its telling scratch, is found in the pond nearby. So the killer entered the fortified greenhouse, took the orchid, went to the alcove, killed Sir Alistair, and then tossed the keycard into the pond. I summarized. Precisely, mon ami. A straightforward sequence. But how was the poison administered? The empty vial suggests a liquid. The crushed orchid suggests... What? A struggle? A last desperate act? Perhaps Sir Alistair realized what was happening and tried to crush the source of the poison, I ventured. Poirot nodded slowly. A possibility. But if the poison was administered via a liquid from the vial, why would he crush an orchid, unless... His eyes suddenly widened. Unless the orchid itself was the vector. But Dr. Sharma said, Orchidea letifera is a neurotoxin. Is it absorbed through touch? I asked. feeling a shiver run down my spine. Not directly through casual touch, no, Poirot explained. But if it were prepared in a specific way, perhaps powdered and mixed, or if the sap were applied to a vulnerable area. And the vial was empty, yes, but what if it was not for containing the poison, but for applying it? He began to pace. Consider this, Hastings. Sir Alistair was a botanist. He lived and breathed plants. He would handle them without suspicion. Imagine if a small, almost invisible puncture was made in his skin, say, on the back of his hand, and then a drop of the orchid's sap applied. Quick, painless, almost undetectable at first. Good heavens, Poirot, you think the killer used a needle? Or something similarly fine, he agreed. And the scratch on the keycard, what if it was made by the very tool used to administer the poison? Perhaps a small, sharp instrument, kept hidden, then scraped against the keycard in a moment of panic or haste, leaving that trace of silver, that tiny, telltale mark. He paused, looking at the map again, then at the details of the crime scene sketch. The waterfall alcove is rather secluded. Who would Sir Alistair have allowed to approach him so closely without suspicion, especially if he was agitated, as Julian Thorne described? Just then, Japp burst back into the study. Poirot, we just got the full autopsy report. The cause of death was indeed a potent neurotoxin. It's consistent with the Orchidea letifera. But there's something else. The medical examiner found a very faint puncture mark, almost microscopic, on the back of Sir Alistair's right hand. And get this, in the small vial, they found a trace, a tiny, almost immeasurable trace of sap from the Orchidea letifera. Poirot smiled, a grim, satisfied expression. So my theory was not so far-fetched after all. The vial was not just a container, but an applicator. And the puncture mark explains the method. Now, Japp, we must find the instrument that made that puncture, and the person who wielded it. Because that instrument, Hastings, if we can identify its nature and its owner, will lead us directly to the killer. The silver trace on the keycard, that minute scratch, it is not an accident. It is a signature. And I believe I am beginning to understand whose signature it is, and the chilling truth behind the accidental death at the Winter Garden. The game has truly begun, and the stakes, I now realize, are far higher than a mere inheritance. The air crackled with anticipation, the pieces of Poirot's intricate puzzle finally beginning to slot into place, revealing a sinister, almost surgical precision to the murder. Chapter 7. Poirot requested a full search of the suspect's belongings, specifically looking for any small, sharp silver instruments that might have left the scratch on the keycard and the puncture mark on Sir Alistair's hand. This, of course, caused a considerable uproar. Mr. Vance grumbled about invasion of privacy, Lady Seraphina burst into fresh tears, and Julian Thorne grew visibly agitated. Dr. Devi Sharma, however, remained impassive, almost stoic. Anya Petrova merely observed with her usual enigmatic detachment. The search of Julian Thorne's person and temporary belongings yielded nothing suspicious, save for a crumpled betting slip and a few unpaid bills, confirming his financial woes. Lady Seraphina's extensive jewelry collection was pristine, no strange implements. Mr. Vance, predictably, carried only his business accoutrements. Then came Anya Petrova. Among her carefully organized possessions, Japp's officers found a beautifully crafted antique silver letter opener, its tip exquisitely sharp. Poirot examined it. A rather elegant weapon, Mademoiselle Petrova, if one were so inclined. She smiled, a hint of disdain in her eyes. It is an heirloom, Monsieur Poirot. I use it for opening my correspondence. Do you truly believe I would use such a cherished item for murder? Perhaps to lend a certain artistic flourish to the deed, Poirot countered, his gaze unwavering. He then held the letter opener near the keycard. comparing the faint silver trace on the card to the material of the opener. It was a match. The scratch, however, did not seem to perfectly align with the sharpest point of the opener. It was almost as if it had been made by a different part of the instrument. "Interesting," Poirot murmured, his brow furrowed. He returned the letter opener to Jap. Finally, the search of Dr. Devi Sharma's belongings. She possessed a meticulous collection of scientific instruments, fine scalpels, dissecting needles, and a variety of precision tools, many of which were indeed silver-tipped. Among them, Jap's men found a small, exquisitely delicate silver stylus, designed for micro-engraving botanical samples. It was similar in material to Sir Alistair's own stylus, but much finer, with an almost needle-like tip. Poirot picked it up, his eyes gleaming. "And what is this, Dr. Sharma?" "My personal stylus," she replied, her voice calm. "I use it for detailed labeling and marking specimens. It's essential for my work." Poirot held the stylus next to the keycard. The tip of the stylus, if scraped sideways, could indeed have created the faint, shallow mark on the keycard, and its needle-fine point was perfectly capable of making the microscopic puncture found on Sir Alistair's hand. The silver material also matched the forensic report. A sudden tension filled the room. All eyes were on Dr. Sharma. Even Jap looked at her with renewed suspicion. Poirot, however, did not immediately accuse her. Instead, he turned his attention back to the AF engraved on the keycard. "Dr. Sharma, you are familiar with Sir Alistair's habit of engraving his initials, yes?" "Yes, he was very proud of his personal touch on his belongings," she replied. "And this scratch next to his initials," Poirot continued, pointing to the faint mark. "Does it look like an accidental slip or something more deliberate, perhaps an attempt to add another initial?" She examined it again, her calm beginning to fray slightly. "It's difficult to say. It's so faint. Perhaps a slip of his own hand in haste." "Perhaps," Poirot conceded. "But this particular silver stylus, Dr. Sharma, is remarkably similar to the one Sir Alistair himself used. Could it be that someone mistook your stylus for his, and in attempting to make a similar mark, created this telltale scratch?" Dr. Sharma's composure finally broke. "No, I never left my stylus unattended, and I certainly didn't kill Sir Alistair. He was my mentor, my friend." Her voice, usually so steady, trembled. Poirot merely nodded, then turned to the assembled group. "The motive, the means, the opportunity. We have found an instrument capable of both marking the keycard and delivering the fatal blow. But the question remains, who held this instrument, and why would they leave such a tiny yet vital clue? The scratch on the keycard, Hastings, is not just a mark. It is a subtle message, a deliberate misdirection designed to point the finger away from the true culprit. Because, mon ami, the killer made a deliberate choice in that moment of haste. A choice that now, I believe, reveals the true identity of the murderer and the astonishing length they went to in order to conceal their heinous crime. We are close, Hastings, very close to unmasking the viper hidden amongst the orchids. The revelation of Dr. Sharma's stylus, while damning, felt too convenient, and Poirot's words hinted at a far more cunning intellect at play, suggesting that the most obvious solution was merely another layer of the deception. Chapter 8. The suspects were dismissed, but the tension in the study remained. Jap was clearly leaning towards Dr. Sharma. "It fits, Poirot. She has the expertise, the access to the fortified greenhouse, the motive to protect the Nightingale's tear from being exploited, and now the weapon. She seems the most logical." Poirot, however, stroked his mustache thoughtfully. "Logic, Jap, is a fine thing, but sometimes it is too direct. It misses the subtle nuances, the elegant deception. Why, if Dr. Sharma was so clever as to devise such a precise murder, would she be so careless as to scratch the keycard with her own stylus, and then leave it for us to find? Perhaps in panic, I suggested. A possibility, Hastings. But the scratch is so faint, so deliberate in its almost initial-like appearance. It is as if it was meant to be noticed, but perhaps misinterpreted. The killer knew we would look for a weapon, a method, and they provided one, perhaps a little too readily. Poirot then turned his attention to the botanical etching that Anya Petrova had mentioned. The missing link, the ancient flower with healing properties, he mused. Anya Petrova claimed it was merely an artistic acquisition for Sir Alistair. But what if it was more? He dispatched one of Japp's officers to retrieve the etching from Anya Petrova's temporary room. When it arrived, it was indeed a beautiful, intricate drawing of a mythical flower, its petals swirling in an almost hypnotic pattern. Sir Alistair's annotations were scribbled in the margins, his neat hand pointing to specific details of the flower's structure. One note, almost illegible, read, "The pattern. D. The key lies in the sequence." D. I questioned. What does that mean? Poirot's eyes lit up. D. Hastings is Latin for of God, but it is also a common abbreviation, especially in scientific contexts, for digitalis europaea, foxglove, a plant with powerful cardiac properties, both medicinal and highly toxic. But Sir Alistair was killed by a neurotoxin from Orchidea latifera, Japp reminded him. Not foxglove. Indeed, Japp, but the etching connects to Sir Alistair's work, to his search for a missing link to refine his Nightingale's tear. What if this etching, with its hidden cipher, was not merely a historical curiosity, but a critical component of his research? And what if Sir Alistair was close to uncovering something that someone desperately wanted to keep hidden? He re-examined the keycard, then the etching. The faint scratch on the keycard looked almost like a partially formed letter D or E. The scratch, D for Davy, or perhaps E for Eleanor, or even another initial entirely. Just then, Miss Eleanor Price, Sir Alistair's quiet, efficient secretary, who had been diligently working in the corner, compiling documents for Japp, coughed softly. "Excuse me, Monsieur Poirot. I couldn't help but overhear. Sir Alistair was very agitated about that etching. He discovered something quite remarkable about it just hours before the party. He was convinced it contained a hidden code, a genetic sequence for a plant that could neutralize the dangerous side effects of the Nightingale's tear. He called it his antidote project." My jaw dropped. An antidote project. This changed everything. Sir Alistair wasn't just trying to prevent his research from being misused. He was actively trying to make it safe. "And who knew about this antidote project?" Poirot asked Miss Price, his gaze sharp. "Only a very few, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Alistair, Dr. Sharma, of course, and I believe Mr. Vance had recently been trying to press him for information about it, wanting to secure rights to both the tear and any potential antidote. Sir Alistair refused vehemently." Poirot's eyes narrowed. So, if Sir Alistair perfected an antidote, it would make his Nightingale's tear project significantly less dangerous and perhaps less valuable as a weapon or a highly controlled substance. It would also potentially ruin the plans of anyone wishing to exploit its more destructive capabilities. He picked up the silver stylus again, looking from it to the etching, then to the keycard. The scratch on the keycard, Hastings, it's not an accident, it's a message. A coded message, and the DI in the etching. It's not just a plant, it's a key. The killer didn't just want to stop Sir Alistair from changing his will. They wanted to stop him from completing this antidote project. Because if he had succeeded, their entire scheme, their entire future, would have been utterly destroyed. The trail, once tangled, is now beginning to focus, with chilling clarity, on a very specific type of individual. Someone who understood the value of both life and death within the intricate world of plants, and who would stop at nothing to control that power. The pieces were finally coming together, not as isolated clues, but as elements of a meticulously planned and desperately executed scheme. the true motive far more sinister than mere greed. Chapter 9. Poirot reassembled the suspects in Sir Alister's study once more. This time, the atmosphere was less tense and more apprehensive, as if everyone sensed the climax approaching. Dr. Sharma looked pale, Lady Seraphina was wringing her hands, and Julian Thorne kept glancing nervously at the door. Mr. Vance looked increasingly annoyed, while Anya Petrova maintained her sphinx-like calm. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice surprisingly soft, "we have been led on a merry dance through this magnificent winter garden. We have considered motives of inheritance, of professional jealousy, of access to dangerous toxins. But the true motive, as it often is, lies deeper, hidden beneath layers of ambition and fear." He picked up the keycard. This keycard, found in the pond, was initially perplexing. Its discovery, however, was no accident. It was intended to be found. It points to access to the fortified greenhouse and the deadly Orchidea latiferaceae. But the crucial detail is this scratch. He held the keycard up for all to see. A faint, almost imperceptible mark, made by a silver instrument. We found a similar stylus belonging to Dr. Sharma. A rather convenient discovery, n'est-ce pas? Dr. Sharma visibly flinched, but Poirot merely waved a dismissive hand. Too convenient, in fact, because the killer is far more subtle, far more devious. The scratch on the keycard was not a mistake. It was a calculated act. An attempt to misdirect us, to suggest a hasty slip by someone unfamiliar with the keycard, or to frame an innocent party. But the keycard itself, with its faint AF engraving, tells a different story. He paused, letting his words hang in the air. The Orchidea latifera provides the poison. The empty vial provides the means of application. The puncture mark on Sir Alister's hand confirms the method. But the motive, the true motive, lies not in Sir Alister's will, but in his antidote project, his work to neutralize the dangerous effects of his nightingale's tear. He then turned to Mr. Reginald Vance. "Monsieur Vance, you were very keen to acquire the rights to the nightingale's tear. You wished to commercialize it, yes? To profit from its revolutionary properties?" Vance squared his shoulders. "It was a sound business venture, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Alister was being unrealistic about the ethical considerations." "Unrealistic, or perhaps principled," Poirot countered. "Sir Alister was developing an antidote. An antidote, Monsieur Vance, that would render the nightingale's tear a safer, but perhaps less lucrative, commodity. Less valuable as a controlled bioweapon, less attractive to those who sought to exploit its raw, dangerous power." Poirot then looked at Anya Petrova. "Mademoiselle Petrova, you brought Sir Alister the botanical etching. You claimed it was an artistic acquisition, but you knew its true significance, did you not? You knew it contained a hidden cipher related to the antidote project. Sir Alister was close to cracking that code, was he not?" Anya's composure finally showed a crack, a flicker of fear in her dark eyes. I merely facilitated the transaction. I'm an art dealer, not a botanist." "Indeed," Poirot said, a glint in his eye. "But you also have connections, do you not, mademoiselle, to certain organizations interested in acquiring powerful new technologies regardless of their ethical implications. Organizations that would pay a considerable sum to prevent an antidote from ever being developed, ensuring the nightingale's tear remained a weapon or a tightly controlled, incredibly valuable resource." He then picked up Sir Alister's silver stylus from the desk, the one used to engrave the AF on the keycard. This stylus, belonging to Sir Alister himself, a unique, personal item, and the scratch on the keycard. It was made not by Dr. Sharma's stylus, but by this one, Sir Alister's own stylus. And this is the critical detail, Hastings. I frowned, confused. But how could Sir Alister's stylus scratch the keycard after he was dead? Unless he made the scratch himself. Precisely, Hastings. but not in an attempt to engrave another initial. He made the scratch in his dying moments. He was trying to tell us something, to leave us a final, desperate clue. And the puncture mark on his hand. It was not just a means of death. It was a clue in itself. He was holding something in his hand when he died, wasn't he? Something that has gone unnoticed. Something that completes the picture. Poirot's gaze swept over all the suspects, lingering on one in particular, his eyes now hard as flint. Sir Alistair knew he was poisoned. He realized in his final moments the hand that had delivered the fatal blow, and he used the last vestiges of his strength not to fight, but to leave us a message. A message so subtle, so personal, that only the killer who knew his habits could truly understand its significance. And that message, mon ami, is etched into the very fabric of this crime, pointing an undeniable finger at the true architect of this meticulously planned, yet ultimately flawed murder. The revelation, I assure you, will be as shocking as it is meticulously logical. The tension in the room was unbearable, as Poirot's final words promised an imminent and devastating exposé, the true killer now cornered in the elaborate web of their own making. Chapter 10. The silence in the study was absolute, punctuated only by the anxious breathing of the suspects. Poirot let it hang, savouring the dramatic pause, before continuing. Sir Alistair, a man of precise habits, always carried his key-card on a lanyard, but it was found in the pond after the deed. This implies it was removed, used to access the Orchidea letifera, and then discarded. But who removed it, and how was the poison administered so subtly? Poirot then held up a silver-tipped fountain pen that had been found in Mr. Vance's breast pocket during the search. Monsieur Vance, your fountain pen, a rather fine instrument, is it not? Vance looked bewildered. It's just a pen, Monsieur Poirot. What has it to do with anything? A great deal, Monsieur Vance. Because Sir Alistair, in his dying moments, was not merely crushing an orchid in a convulsion. He was trying to tell us something. He had, you see, a rare Paphiopedilum bellatulum in his hand. The crushed orchid. It was his favourite, a specimen he often carried to show off. Poirot paused, then looked directly at Mr. Vance. But it was not the orchid he was trying to crush to deliver a message. It was the vial itself, containing the Orchidea letifera ses, sap, held against his other hand, being applied by the killer, which he desperately tried to mark. And he did mark it, but not the vial. He marked something else, something he was struggling to grasp, something that was still in the killer's hand when the deed was done. Poirot then picked up Sir Alistair's silver stylus again. This stylus, which Lady Seraphina confirmed Sir Alistair used to engrave his initials. It was found on his desk. It has not left this room since the murder, and yet the key-card, found in the pond, bears a scratch consistent with this very stylus, or one very like it. My head was spinning. But how, Poirot? If the stylus was here, and the key-card was in the pond, how could Sir Alistair have made the mark? Ah, Hastings, there is the beauty of the deception. The killer did not use Dr. Sharma's stylus. The killer did not use their own distinct tool. The killer used Sir Alistair's own stylus, and they placed it back on his desk to make it appear as if it had no connection to the crime. But Sir Alistair, in his final moments, knew who had used it. He knew who had, with precise, almost surgical, intent, used his own prized tool, modified for their sinister purpose, to inflict the fatal wound. Poirot then looked at Dr. Sharma. Dr. Sharma, you spoke of the meticulous security of the fortified greenhouse. The keycard was essential, but what if there was another way in, a way known only to a trusted few? And what if the killer knew Sir Alistair's habits so intimately that they knew exactly where he would be, and precisely when, to deliver the blow? Dr. Sharma, though still pale, now watched Poirot with a strange intensity, almost a dawning understanding, The puncture mark on Sir Alister's hand was almost microscopic. It required a very fine, sharp instrument, an instrument that could easily be concealed, an instrument that, perhaps, was not obviously a weapon, but a tool of precision. Like this stylus. Poirot held up Sir Alister's stylus again. But this stylus, as it is not sharp enough to inflict such a fine puncture. He then turned to the other side of the desk, where Sir Alister's various tools lay. He picked up a small, exquisitely crafted jeweller's loop and a miniature, almost invisible, diamond-tipped file. He used the file to carefully demonstrate how one might sharpen the tip of the silver stylus to a needle point, a point capable of making the microscopic puncture. Someone took Sir Alister's own stylus, sharpened it with his own tools, used it to administer the poison, then returned it to his desk, hoping we would never make the connection to the keycard, nor to the fact that the stylus itself had been modified. But Sir Alister, in his last breath, saw the glint of his own silver stylus being turned against him. Poirot's gaze then settled squarely on Lady Seraphina, who had been listening with increasing agitation, her delicate features now contorted in a mask of dawning horror and fear. Lady Seraphina! Poirot's voice was now sharp, cutting through the silence like a knife. You were the one who found Sir Alister. You were the one who shrieked. You knew he was planning to change his will, potentially disinheriting you. You knew of his antidote project, which, if successful, would diminish the value of the Nightingale's tear to your associates. And you, my dear Lady Seraphina, were the only one who had the intimate knowledge of Sir Alister's habits, his personal belongings, and his schedule to carry out such a precisely calculated murder. The key-card was not stolen from him. It was in your possession, placed there by Sir Alister himself, to retrieve a specific rare orchid for you, a request made by you in a moment of feigned affection, moments before your deadly act. And the scratch on the key-card? Hastings? That almost initial-like mark. It was Sir Alister's last desperate act. He scraped his own stylus against the key-card, trying to write an initial. Not AF for Alistair Finch, but S for Seraphina, the last name he heard, the last face he saw, the face of his killer. The confession was unspoken, but Lady Seraphina's sudden, guttural gasp, as all eyes turned to her, left no doubt as to the chilling truth. Chapter 11. Lady Seraphina's elegant facade crumbled. Her face, usually so composed, contorted into a mask of pure terror and despair. She shook her head wildly, tears streaming down her face, but there was a wildness in her eyes that betrayed her. No, it's not true. I loved Alister. Her voice was shrill, desperate. Poirot, however, remained impassive. Love, Lady Seraphina, can take many forms, and greed, too, can masquerade as affection. You knew of Sir Alister's intention to revise his will. Julian Thorne heard him speak of disinheriting undeserving parties. You, in fact, were likely one of them, as your extravagant spending habits had been a constant source of friction. But the true catalyst was the antidote project. He turned to Anya Petrova. Mademoiselle Petrova, your artistic acquisition was not merely for Sir Alister's collection. You were the conduit, were you not? You connected Lady Seraphina to those who sought to control the Nightingale's tear as a weapon, or as a highly profitable, dangerous drug. They promised her a substantial sum for information, and to ensure the antidote never saw the light of day. Sir Alister's death would not only secure her immediate inheritance, but also guarantee a much larger payout from your shadowy clients. Anya Petrova's cool exterior finally cracked. She averted her gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. She said nothing, but her silence was damning. You, Lady Seraphina, knew Sir Alister's habits perfectly, Poirot continued, his voice relentless. You knew he would be in the waterfall alcove at that time, admiring his new Paphiopedilum bellatulum. You convinced him to hand you his keycard, perhaps with a charming request to retrieve a particularly sensitive specimen from the fortified greenhouse for him, an act of trust which you then cruelly betrayed. You entered the greenhouse, took the Orchidea latifera, sap, refined it with the tools you knew Sir Alistair possessed, particularly the jeweller's loop and diamond file to sharpen his own personal stylus to a needlepoint. He picked up the sharpened stylus from the desk, holding it up for all to see. This, Lady Seraphina, was the murder weapon, modified by your own hand, knowing that Sir Alistair's own possessions would be less scrutinized. You returned the stylus to his desk, cleaned of any fingerprints, confident it would remain undiscovered. You approached Sir Alistair in the secluded alcove. He, unsuspecting, allowed you close. You used the sharpened stylus to inflict the microscopic puncture on his hand, perhaps under the guise of admiring his prize orchid, or even a playful touch. The neurotoxin, odorless and tasteless, acted quickly. But not so quickly that Sir Alistair did not realize his imminent death and the hand that delivered it. In his last desperate moments, with the venom coursing through his veins, he attempted to convey your identity. His mind, even in agony, was logical, precise. He struggled to find a way. He knew he was clutching his favorite orchid. He knew his keycard, used moments before by your hand, was still nearby, perhaps discarded by you in your haste. With his last strength, he scraped the sharpened stylus against the keycard, attempting to engrave the letter S for Seraphina, the S he had seen on your face in that moment of betrayal. A final, silent accusation. He then held up the keycard again, pointing to the faint scratch. The scratch, Hastings. It is not a complete S. It is merely the initial, almost vertical stroke, a desperate, unfinished attempt. But it is enough. Coupled with the fact that the scratch came from Sir Alistair's own modified stylus, and the convenient disappearance of the keycard into the pond, only to be found later, a ruse to distract us from the true weapon, all points to one undeniable truth. Jap, who had been listening with grim fascination, finally stepped forward. "Lady Seraphina, I'm arresting you for the murder of Sir Alistair Finch." Her composure completely shattered. She collapsed into a chair, sobbing hysterically, denying everything even as her body language screamed guilt. Julian Thorne looked horrified, Lady Beatrice shocked, and Mr. Vance, while still gruff, seemed genuinely unnerved by the chilling precision of the crime. Dr. Sharma, however, looked at Poirot with a profound sense of respect and perhaps relief. Poirot merely sighed, a profound weariness settling upon him. The little grey cells, Hastings, they see everything, even the smallest scratch, the most subtle scent, the most carefully planned deception. The winter garden, a place of vibrant life and exquisite beauty, became a stage for a terrible act of betrayal and death. And the motive, as always, was a blend of human frailty and insatiable greed. Another life extinguished, another intricate puzzle solved. But the memory of that almost initial, that desperate S on the keycard, will, I confess, remain with me for a very long time. The case was closed, the murderer exposed, but the lingering shadow of the winter garden's dark secret remained, a testament to the chilling lengths to which human ambition could drive even the most outwardly charming individuals. Chapter 12. With Lady Seraphina's tearful, if incomplete, confession, the case of death at the Winter Garden was officially closed. Anya Petrova was also taken in for questioning regarding her connections to international organizations interested in the Nightingale's tear. Poirot had meticulously laid out the entire sequence of events, from Lady Seraphina's initial contact with Petrova's shadowy clients, to her manipulation of Sir Alistair's trust, the meticulous modification of his own stylus, the precise delivery of the poison, and finally, the desperate, dying clue he left behind. The intricate dance of ambition, betrayal, and scientific genius had come to a grim end. The Winter Garden, stripped of its crime scene tape, slowly began to regain its sense of peaceful serenity in the following days. Yet, for me, and I dare say for Poirot too, it would forever carry the faint echo of Lady Seraphina's desperate shriek in the memory of a brilliant botanist's final, silent message. Poirot, as was his custom after a particularly trying case, spent an afternoon meticulously polishing his collection of small porcelain figurines. He seemed lost in thought, his usual meticulousness imbued with a deeper contemplation. "It is always the details, Hastings," he murmured, holding up a tiny elephant. "The small things, dismissed by others, are often the keys to the largest mysteries. The scratch on the key card, the specific orchid, the missing antidote project. Each a thread carefully woven into a tapestry of deceit. It is a pity, is it not? Such beauty, such scientific brilliance, brought low by simple human avarice." "It always is, Poirot," I agreed, sipping my tea. "Always some form of greed or jealousy at the heart of it. And a complete lack of regard for the sanctity of human life," he added, placing the elephant back on its shelf with a sigh. "Sir Alistair sought to harness nature for good, to heal. His wife and those she collaborated with sought to twist it for profit and power. It is a conflict as old as time itself." He then looked at me, a rare, almost melancholic smile touching his lips. "But the little grey cells, mon ami, they prevailed once more. The truth, however unpleasant, has been